Unit 1, topics 4, 5, and 6, biological macromolecules. We're going to talk about the properties, the structures, and functions. Lipids. Lipids are a class of molecules that do not include true polymers. Remember at the very beginning, I told you they were a little special in this macromolecule. Generally, they're pretty small in size, but they often are not considered to be macromolecule at all. That's just someone's opinion. But lipids are nonpolar and they're also hydrophobic, right? So we have many different types of lipids like fats, phospholipids, steroids. We also have waxes. There's also cholesterol. I can think of many. Fats are composed of glycerol and fatty acid tails. Glycerol is the alcohol, or it's called a hydroxyl group. All right. The fatty acid are those tails, those chains that are hanging off of the alcohol. That's a carboxyl group at one end of it. So three fatty acids, they join to a glycerol via this ester linkage, which we'll talk about in later detail. But basically the bond between this hydroxyl, this OH group, and this carboxyl group together will create this fatty acid. And we have different classifications of fats, like we can have saturated fats, unsaturated fats. Essentially, saturated fats, they don't have any double bonds between the carbon to carbon linkage. So that allows for there to be more hydrogens attached to it, hence the term saturated. So it's like saturated with hydrogens. Unsaturated fats, they're going to contain one or more, usually lots of double bonds. And so they'll have less hydrogens attached to it. They'll have less available hydrogen space. And so they'll be less saturated with hydrogens. Since I don't have a very good photo of that, I'm going to just draw it. All right, here's my best example. Here's my saturated fat. I have this carbon, carbon, carbon backbone. And because everybody's singly bonded, there's lots of room for hydrogens to attach. Remember, carbon has a structure like this. It has available bonds for everybody to attach to it right there. So in a saturated fat, it's saturated with hydrogens. In an unsaturated fat, carbon has these double bonds to itself. So imagine there being another carbon with its bonds like this. So these guys are going to bond, and then those guys are going to bond. So we have less hydrogens, so it's unsaturated with hydrogens. So at this point, I'm always asked, like, well, why is a saturated fat bad for you and an unsaturated fat is better for you? And if you think about it, if you were stomach acid and you wanted to get energy out of this molecule, you would kind of swoop in and break a bond there and break a bond there. And every time you broke a bond, you got lots and lots and lots of energy out of it. So there's all these different bonds to break here in this saturated fat, and hence the term extrapolating lots of energy out of it. In an unsaturated fat that doesn't have as many hydrogens, this double bond right here, this is really, really strong. So it's hard for, like, we'll just say stomach acid, lack of a better word right now, to break that double bond. It's a double bond, it's a lot stronger, so it requires more work to break it. So these guys are a lot easier to break. So you're not going to get as much energy out of, or stored energy, I guess you could say, out of an unsaturated fat. And essentially they carry less calories and less energy that can be stored as fat. Here's my fatty acid, my phospholipid. All cell membranes are comprised of this phospholipid, and it's these two saturated or unsaturated, tails hanging off of this hydrophobic head. And this hydrophobic head, we would normally say that it's a phosphate group, and it is. There's your PO4 right there, but it also has glycerol in it. So between the phosphorus and the glycerol, we get this hydrophobic head. So part of the molecule is water loving and part of the molecule is water hating. I guess I should say water fearful, technically. Steroids are a special kind of lipid. They have these four fused rings, and the unique groups that are attached to those rings will give them their name. What you're looking at is testosterone. Remember, hormones are a lipid. Hormones are a steroid, and they are a lipid. And so, in summary of macromolecules and AP biology, there are four macromolecules: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Of those four, they all have a monomer, but technically only three of them have a true polymer. The monomers are monosaccharides, amino acids, glycerols or fatty acids, and nucleic acids monomer is a nucleotide. So those monomers will construct to form larger molecules or polymers. Monosaccharides will form polysaccharides. Amino acids will form polypeptides, and nucleic acids will ultimately construct DNA or RNA. So these glycerols and fats do not technically have a true polymer. Lots of elements are involved here, but just really the important ones are for what you need to know and understand for this unit. So carbohydrates contain that it's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, remember, in the form of CH2O. And then proteins will have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. Lipids will have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and then phosphorus in the form of that phospholipid. And then nucleic acids, although have more variety of certain things, will contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus.